Okay, so after the last video I made critiquing the whole Destiny situation and talking about a retrospective, which again, thank you very much for the response on that. First of all, I know that some of you are here just for the lore, and to those of you, I'm really sorry, this is not necessarily one of those videos. It is a lot of critique, and I'm terribly sorry, it's just not going to be something where there's narrative. More of that coming soon, I promise, also on other games. Secondly, I know that talking about any topic where you critique anything now is a little bit of a kind of warning flare that allows a bunch of little gremlins to come out and cause a ruckus in the comments. As I said about a week ago, yeah, my sentiment on that has not changed. I'm not dealing with that nonsense, I'm avoiding it where possible. The mental energy it takes to deal with that nonsense is frankly maddening. But that's why I didn't really want to make a video like this. I much prefer the game to be in a good state so we can all just sit back and enjoy playing it. Unfortunately, it's not. And as someone who is still very much playing the game, I'm going to be giving feedback and pointing out what I believe to be critical mistakes. And a mistake like this is something that wouldn't necessarily have doomed Ashen Iron on its own, but it adds to the overall picture. And I think it is a major stumbling block. Surprising perhaps nobody in this community, which has already memed on the idea of the "I'll take the lance, hold the plague" bit. Not bringing back Siva whilst also bringing back the plague lands is a massive miss. I really don't want to be rude, but I think it needs to be said as well that it feels really quite tone-deaf doing this. Siva has been a point of interest for Destiny players for years. Seeing as Rise of Iron released back in 2016, I think, yeah, it is fair to say that basically there's a decade's worth of interest there. Sure, 9 years not 10, but you get the point, we're close enough. I'm sure Bungie can tell this based on the purchasing of Eververse ornaments featuring the red and black nanites alone. It is a popular topic. It's also something players have asked for years, and frankly, why shouldn't they? Siva conceptually and aesthetically is really awesome. In the year that Bungie made Rise of Iron, they happened to create one of the most striking visuals in the entire game's history, and it's got some great narrative punch to it. It represents humanity's heights of achievement, but also the absolute danger of technology that you don't fully understand or control, and the hubris that comes from assuming that you can control something like that. There's the mythical comparisons one can draw between Siva and the Holy Grail, with Radagast being our analogue to King Arthur, which yes is something I've banged on about for years at this point. Sorry, I know I'm a broken record, but I think that's one of the more interesting storytelling bits about it. There's also interesting ideas that Siva brings to the table whenever the Fallen interact with it too. We get to see an alternate take on divinity as being something where your consciousness transcends and apotheosis occurs through mechanization. And from there, there's interesting questions about how consciousness changes or adapts when transforming from a biological thing into a mechanical one. The community has been really excited for Siva to be a part of the universe again, and it shows. Back in 2020, we saw fans create a fan-made trailer for a hypothetical, quote, Season of the Plague. Now, the naming and timing of this was pretty poor given that the big Rona was rampaging across the world at the time, but I think people understood that the context wasn't going to be taken out of context. And so, yeah, people on the project, myself included, went ahead with that. And it showed something else pretty clearly, which was that people had a desire to see Siva as another part of the world. The question of whether Siva would return has also been a question that's been asked of Bungie a number of times over the years. At the time of the Light and Dark saga, I believe back in Witch Queen, it was made clear that they had no plans for Siva at the time. But that was in the Light and Dark saga, and the Light and Dark saga is over. Ashen Iron was announced to feature a return to the Plague Lands. Now I'll be honest, I was more hyped for Ashen Iron than I initially was for Edge of Fate. The Nine are a nebulous thing, hard to define, and it's hard to know how the expansion's gonna pan out and tell a story like that. But why was I hyped for Ashen Iron? Well, because we only knew one thing about it, and it was the Plaguelands location. The location had baggage, and that baggage seemed to imply awesome things as far as Siva's narrative moving forward was concerned. Because it's the Plaguelands, man. Come on. Doing something in the Plaguelands without mentioning Siva would be like doing something on board the Dreadnought without mentioning Oryx. The actual location and the thing that made it the way it is are narratively and thematically baked together. You cannot unbake that metaphorical cake, especially when the place is literally called the Plaguelands. Now, granted, I wasn't sure what to expect from this update's narrative overall, but I think just by putting up the expectation of the Plague Lands coming back, you're also expecting the Plague to come back too. Now, to be really clear about it, these are expectations that were put up well before the update itself actually launched, and so, yeah, was I setting up expectations and false failure for myself? Maybe. Here's the thing, I mean, I'm not against the idea of a narrative team taking something in a location where there is a certain set of expectations and then flipping it on its head or going in a different direction that's equally interesting. The problem is, in Ashen Iron, this doesn't really happen. I mean, it feels really bizarre because Maya and her chorus are looking for Golden Age technology, and that culminates in the Heliostat mission with them claiming a warsat and trying to use it, and the rocket on it, which will then boost the signal of Maya's commands and make up for her damaged echo. The problem with that is that you could have done that literally anywhere in Destiny's world, barring a few locations, and it'd have made sense, and you wouldn't have had to deal with the baggage of the Plague Lands. I mean, take a look at Titan. Titan is covered in Golden Age tech. Sure, you might have trouble finding a location where you could launch a warsat from one of the arcologies, but it's not impossible, and the amount of Golden Age tech in an ancient Golden Age city is pretty high. Mars has properly returned to us, and with it, the city of Freehold. And, you know, the old Warmind core in Hellas Basin, and the dozens of other locations spoken of in the lore on Mars. Venus has the old Ishtar Academy, and the surrounding research units that looked into Vex technology with what were probably some of the most advanced tools of humanity's golden age. Hell, this could have been confined to just the normal Cosmodrome, and it would have caused less of a stir than it did by jumping into the Plague Lands. And that's saying something because I know that the Cosmodrome accounts for a little under a third of the locations in the Plague Lands, with the Breach and the Rocket Yard being featured. But doing this here in the Plague Lands and looking for Golden Age tech feels like looking for silver in a gold mine. I mean, yeah, there might be other veins of precious metals in here, and we should care about them too, but we're missing the obvious thing down here, aren't we? The gold? The Siva? The plague of the Plague Lands? Okay, so with all that in mind, and the community's expectations of things, and my expectations of things at very least, we do have a major narrative point which I think throws a spanner in the work of some of this. Siva is dead, or at least dormant. That's all thanks to the death of Rasputin and everything that's followed on from that point. Combine that with us destroying the replicator in Rise of Iron, and you have a major problem for the idea of Siva returning. But here's the thing. Adhering to those rules is very much a choice, and it's not always the right one. I mean, Final Shape would have been nothing without Cayde 6. Cayde 6 was also dead, and whilst bringing him back was a risk, it was actually handled really well in the Final Shape. Hell, I'd say that despite the way that some people received Heresy's ending, it was handled well in Heresy with Oryx as well. To put it really bluntly, Bungie's narrative team has shown that they're really good at bringing characters back in a respectful way. And sure, Siva isn't a character, it's a concept, it's a thing, but narratively speaking, yeah, I trust them to bring back something like Siva. It's weird sitting there and not seeing that done. So, yeah, why not bring it back? I've already discussed from back before when Ashen Iron's trailer dropped, just as it was initially talked about for the first time on the live streams, on what my speculation for the entire update might be and what we might see in it. And in that video I talked about how Maya could step in as a commanding influence over Siva. Needless to say, that didn't pan out. Obviously, there are other plans for Maya in the story at large, but I think it's really frustrating to not see further acknowledgement of Siva as part of the game generally when Maya is explicitly searching for Golden Age tech in the Plague Lands. I wanted to hold off on this video because I didn't know if Siva would make a proper appearance in Heliostat, and, well, it sort of does, but it's all dead, as we've seen in the rest of the Plague Lands. Now, with that, we know that Siva isn't in Ashen Iron in any capacity other than set dressing, and I feel like it's okay to make a video criticizing its absence now. I do also want to touch on one further point of the lore, which is the existence of the Neomuni nanite fluid, which is definitively identified now as Quicksilver. Quicksilver actually originates from a more advanced and refined form of Siva that is also potentially mixed with Vex technology. The Veil containment logs make more than a few heavy-handed hints to this idea, with Nimbus even asking at a certain point if they are made from partial Vex technology, given that the Cloud Striders are also made with Siva. Quicksilver is actually used a lot in Heliostat by the Scions of Keitel's Ascendancy, who do things such as breaking down Siva barriers with their superior nanites. Quicksilver might be based on Siva technology, but it has abandoned the classic red and black aesthetic for something that is quite literally like Quicksilver, or Mercury, where the silver kind of particulate fluid that the nanites make up can be formed into whatever is required. And in itself that's not terrible, although I have to admit I clearly prefer the old aesthetic, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. The fact that the Scions use Quicksilver to break down dead Siva also proves a bit of a superiority within the lore of Quicksilver over Golden Age Siva, meaning that we have access to superior nanites anyway. This might be a point of critique to say, well, we have Neomuna on our side and Quicksilver at our disposal, so why do we need Siva in the story anyway if we have something more effective than it? Why is the old stuff even exciting at all if it's redundant? Now, from a technical perspective and a lore perspective, yeah, all of that is correct. I disagree, however, with the idea that the old stuff should not be used. Here's the thing, right? You can cook a meal over a stove or over an open fire. The stove is certainly more refined and will get the job done more quickly, but the fire technically works, and it can get the job done. Just in the same way, our Quicksilver can overpower Siva, but that isn't to say that Siva isn't still dangerous. Even if we have Quicksilver, which is superior to Siva, it isn't to say that Siva isn't still dangerous, and having it in the hands of someone like Maya makes it particularly dangerous. Take a slightly more dangerous approach and replace our stove and fire with a gun and a crossbow. You wouldn't want someone who has ill intentions for people to have either of those things. Yes, a firearm is certainly more effective, but in a pinch a crossbow is still gonna get the damn job done, and it's gonna be lethal, just in the same way. Not to mention there's actually a narrative boon that I think you can have here, which is that having enemies in different factions with a wide variety of capabilities makes the world feel richer and more interesting in my opinion. For example, we always make a point in the community about, well, who would be more powerful? This faction or this faction? Siva is another axis by which power can be expressed by Maya and her choral faction, and it's something which means that she is clearly lesser than the Neomuni, but in her hands she has the ability to command it in a superior fashion, and that can overwhelm a variety of forces, whether they're Vex, or Elixni, or Cabal. And then there's the scary possibilities of giving Maya access to technology like this. Who's to say that she couldn't use the technology of Neomuna that she's so well versed in to then create her own form of Quicksilver, maybe a new form of nanite fluid that keeps that significantly more menacing form of red aesthetic, whilst still taking on the properties of Quicksilver. This is me spitballing, and I'm not here to sit there and say that I should be doing a better job at this than the narrative at all. That is not what I am trying to say. All I'm trying to point out is that there is a lot of rich narrative ground for something like Siva to still exist in Destiny's universe. Hell, do a thought experiment and just give it to any faction, any leader, any enemy, and see what they do with it. And it's interesting to just think about the possibilities. And even if you go ahead and think about anything beyond those narrative implications for Siva, I think it's really clear that the community sentiment towards the idea of implementing it again would be really good because, well, we've been asking for this for years, damn it. We got it for one expansion and then it was over. And it also contained a pretty damn cool raid and it gave us a really damn awesome sub-faction. And, well, now it's kind of just gone. We've seen people from Bungie repeatedly say that Siva is dead, and yeah, sure it is. But why does it have to be? Why does it have to stay that way? This is a point at which Bungie has a great ingredient that they can throw into the mix. And currently, it's not being utilized. And that really doesn't feel right. So yeah, that's why I feel, at very least, like the implementation of Siva in Ashen Iron, or the lack of implementation, I suppose, feels like a really massive miss. And I feel like this is a moment where Bungie failed to utilize a potential element of the world that the community would have really loved. And in a time when we need good news, we need to change the entire narrative around the game and how things generally are being received by the community. Anyway, that's my piece for today. I promise I'll talk more about the Epic Raid and Heliostat when I have time. I just think I needed to say all of this because that thought of what about Siva has been eating me ever since Ashen Iron launched, and I wanted to hold off until I had the complete picture. Also, expect some of the other content on other games soon that I promised. I have not forgotten about that. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll catch you all soon, and hopefully this is received loud and clear. I hope my critique is not too harsh, but at the same time I hope it comes through with all of the clarity that's needed. Because yeah, this didn't work. And I hope that the narrative team can see why.